honor to be here, to be called here. I must specifically thank Professor Shurujit Majumdar, Julius, to call me. As Professor Jayati Ghosh said, this crisis didn't come suddenly from the heavens after people stopped buying cars and two-wheelers and all, And I think the origins actually, this crisis I think started with Bharat, And because if you see our two-wheeler sales, at the start of the century was something around 35 to 36 lakh per year, and then it rose to about 2 crore a year. So, and most of this was in rural areas, on the back of farm income and this one. So, one second, where do I move? Where is the thing? Yeah. So this is a place called Khandoli near Agra. This is on the Agra Hathras Sasni Road. You'll find a lot of cold stores, and this was a scene where most farmers actually put their potatoes in cold stores, but this time they don't have the money, and they didn't put they couldn't afford to pay the storage, so they were just selling it on the road. In February 2016, Narendra Modi announced at a rally in Bareilly that the government wants to double farm incomes by 2022. You have this rule of 72, right? The growth rate you need to double your incomes, And since he said it in February 2016, and he wanted to double farm incomes by 2022, that means 6 years. So basically, you need the growth to happen by about 12% a year. Okay, and this is basically gross value added, and which is basically the value of output of a good, minus less the cost of inputs and raw materials which go into the production of a good. So you can take this as a reasonable proxy for farm incomes. So if you look at it, if you see what happened after January, March 2017, and that was a new crop which came after demonetization, you can see that it has been in single digits, and there are many months, like for example April, June, July, September 2018 and October, December 2018, where the growth in current terms, is lower than in real terms. So, which means basically you are having deflation, okay? And this is what has been happening. Then, this is a chart which shows consumer price inflation, which is basically both food and general. You can see this is 36 months, 3 years, from September 2016 to July 2000 to August 2019. This is yesterday's data. You have 36 months continuously where your food inflation, retail food inflation, is lower than overall food inflation. This has probably never happened in India's history. If you see the average food inflation during this period, retail food inflation, it comes to around 1.4% per year, whereas the general inflation was about something like 3.5 a year. And we probably, that is almost 2 percentage points lower. This is probably unprecedented in recorded Indian history. I don't know. I can stand corrected, but I think this has never happened for a long time. And you can see that the fall started sometime from the real fall started. So I'm saying why this is very unusual, because I'm looking at the previous 36 months. Okay, the previous 3 years. You can see how it is. It is almost the reverse. There are only 7 months out of this 36 months where food inflation is lower than the general inflation. Okay, and you can see that actually, and out of those 7 months, the fall actually started from around October of 2014. That is where, around September, October was the first time where your retail food inflation fell below general inflation. That was around the time I joined Indian Express. So because I think So what were the reasons? The first is, of course, you have had a crash in global commodity prices. This happened around the time, around say the middle of 2014. and you can see how your food prices, sort of, it kind of crashed, the global food prices fell, and along with it, there was this obsession of this Modi government with a strong rupee, that you should have a strong rupee, and that's how, and that is a sign of strength. So if you look at the real effective exchange rate, which is basically India's, the rupees exchange rate with a basket of about 36 currencies, where basically you're leading your currency block countries, and you adjust for inflation differentials. So there's been a huge appreciation of the rupee. So you had two effects, one is because of a collapse of prices, then your rupee appreciating in real terms. So because of that, you had a collapse of exports and increasing vulnerability to imports. So I would say the crisis started from around that time, and just to give an idea, what happened in the previous decade, if you see, our exports shot up massively, from something like about $7.5 billion to $43 billion, and it was across all commodities, whether it was like some of these were very quite new, like buffalo meat, for example, maize. India never exported maize, and across, like for example, guar gum, so unlike other countries, our export basket, agri-export basket was fairly diversified, if you see. So you had this, and at the end of 2014, you had a sudden crash in prices, along with this whole thing of a on a strong rupee, which was probably aided by the fact that your oil imports fell, So because of that, your whatever current account deficit reduced and all these things, and there were a lot of inflows because of Modi government coming in and all these things, So you can see what happened. Our imports suddenly just boomed. If you see, not only did our exports fall, our trade surplus in agriculture was something like about almost $28 billion in 2013-14, and that fell to about $8 billion by 2016-17. So I would say that the external factor was one major reason for the origins of the agrarian crisis, which happened. But I think there have been equally domestic factors also behind this whole thing, and I think the prominent one has been this very aggressive inflation targeting, And India is the only country where where the RBI has gone in for inflation targeting based on the consumer price index, where food items have almost 46% share. And how can you control inflation? RBI cannot. Like by increasing repo rates, you're not going to control prices of tomatoes, or this thing. So what did they do? What did the Modi government do? They just went hard on farm prices, because somehow they wanted to somehow bring down prices at any cost. So for the first time, after some 10 years, onions and potatoes were brought under the Essential Commodities Act, and minimum export prices. Incidentally, today they have again imposed a minimum export restrictions, and on onion, because onion prices have risen a little, and farmers are having a chance to make money. Then and they have even decided to import onions, including from Pakistan, so for whatever. So it goes against their own this thing. So you had, like they've been like, you had income tax raids. For the first time, income tax department went sniffing after onions, whereas they normally look into unearned incomes, undeclared incomes. For the first time in the history, you had the principal commissioner of income tax in Pune saying that no, you're hoarding onions and all. That's not their job, but this is what happened. So because of that, and in a scenario where global prices are already falling, and on top of it, you also have this kind of thing which has happened. Same thing you had in the case of pulses. In 2016-17, India's pulses output shot up from about 16 million tons to about 23 million tons. And in that same very year, you also had record imports, of something like 6.5 million tons. So you had both of these kind of things. At the same time, there were export bans. Farmers were not allowed to benefit from the global trade, from this thing. And only when prices crashed that they removed these stock holding and export curbs, etc. So if you see whether it is in sugar, whether it is in pulses, whether it is in potatoes, whether it is in onions, the whole this thing, because you have gone into this inflation targeting based on controlling food prices, which ultimately affects only the farmers, right? I mean, whereas ideally the government should build stocks. If it wants to intervene on behalf of the thing, you can build a stock of just like they have done for rice, for wheat. Nothing stops you from having stocks of potatoes, stocks of onions. But why should the farmer suffer, you know, whereas the farmer actually benefited in the earlier regime when it happened? And this has been the whole thing which has happened. And I think what has happened is, and demonetization was basically just the last straw, you know, and there it entirely collapsed. See, if you go to a mandi, typically what you go is, a farmer typically brings his produce, say chana or soya bean, in his tractor trolley, you know, which will be say about 35-40 quintals, you know, 4 tons or something. So if you see and you take an average value of say rupees 3,000 to rupees 4,000 per quintal, so the value of his tractor trolley is something like 1 lakh or 1.6 lakh, 1.5 lakh and all. See, earlier what used to happen is the farmer would come, he would sell, he would get the whole money in cash. Okay, and with this cash, then the farmer would buy fertilizer, seed, pesticide, oil cake, and even things like, you know, household utensils, clothes, kirana store items, everything, and would take back in the same tractor. He would go back on the return journey. But now you have this whole rule. See, demonetization didn't end in November 2016. After that, you had the 2017-18 budget. They came out with this whole thing that they amended the section 40A3 of the Income Tax Act, where they said that cash payments above 10,000 rupees to any person in a single day will not be allowed. I mean, and any payment beyond that, it will not be allowed as a deduction in computation of income from profits and gains from business. You know, so, and in this current budget, they have gone one step further. You know, any cash withdrawals exceeding 1 crore in a single year, in a year from any bank, automatically there will be 2% tax deducted at source. See, now, whom does this affect ultimately? This affects only the farmers. See, earlier, as I said, you know, if he was selling 1.5 lakh worth of cash, he would take it and he would buy, and then he would go back home, and then he would probably return to the mandi for the next crop. You know, whereas now what is happening is he's getting only 10,000 rupees in cash, which is, so he can just fill his diesel tank, you know, of the tractor, and then go back, and then he has to wait now for some time, you know, to get the remaining. So if I've got 1.5 lakh is what is owed to me, I get 10,000 rupees. The remaining 1.4 lakh rupees he has to wait for the payment to be credited to his account. In rural areas, unlike our places, there is no internet banking, right? And typically the trader will give a check which will take 15 days to clear. Okay. Alternatively, he will go and the trader has to then go to the bank and fill up NEFT forms, you know, and each farmer's name. And typically, and it is impossible if you go in a mandi during the real peak season. Typically, one trader will buy from about say 30 farmers. Now going to the bank, filling up the forms, and then, you know, the trader will say, "Nee, aapka naam galat hua," you know. So somebody's name and the bank account number, they will be no. So what is happening is the money is just not coming, you know, there is no money. Whereas earlier that farmer would earn the money, he would spend it there itself, and there would be demand even for things around that place, you know. And same thing for the traders. If you look at it, see, an average trader, if you go to Indore, Ujjain, any mandi, will typically buy at least say 1,000 bags. You know, so 1,000 bags daily in the peak season. 1,000 bags, if it is say 3,000 rupees, that means spending about 30 lakh rupees per day. See, now the trader is not earning 30 lakhs a day. He will get only whatever 2% commission on that 30 lakhs. But there are traders who buy 3,000 bags, 1,000 bags. So for them, you know, this 1 crore is a matter of 2 days trade. You know, same thing. Say, suppose you take a buffalo meat plant. Okay, a buffalo meat plant will typically they do say slaughtering of about 1,000 to 1,500 animals a day. okay, and they procure it from these so-called registered suppliers. There will be about 10 to 15 of them, you know. So and those people, the plant may pay through RTGS or whatever, but those traders in turn, those registered suppliers in turn withdraw cash and give it to the village level vyapari, you know, who may bring. So typically, say, suppose the supplier is every day supplying, say, 100 to 150 buffaloes every day, you know, and each is costing say 20,000 rupees. So that itself, if you see, every day he's doing business of something like 20 to 30 lakhs. So now today, if he were to buy for 5 days, 6 days, you are already exhausting that 1 crore limit, right? And then you have to pay the TDS. Now who suffers in the process? It is the farmer, you know. See, what basically demonetization and this whole obsession with this cash and all these things has done, it has done two things, you know. One, it has killed liquidity. And the second is, it has killed sentiment. Okay. See, we should understand how commodity markets operate. You know, one crop, say a wheat crop or this thing, it is sold by farmers in 3 months, but that crop is consumed for 12 months, right? So that means there is somebody who's buying it, stocking it, and then selling it, right? And there are these entire distribution chains, right? And that's what they do. Earlier, what was happening was this produce trading, it was happening in cash. Okay, they would buy in cash and then sell and then sell in cash, make profit. That money would be invested in some land. Then that land would get sold, right? And then with that money, we would probably invest in a cinema theater. So basically, money was circulating, you know, in the economy. A lot of money, and it was all within India itself. You know, it is not going into Swiss banks or anything. You know, these were whatever you can call them, whatever small agro commercial capital or something. You know, I mean, they were not big guys or somebody, and they were dealing in cash. You know, it's something like, for example, when you go to Surat, you know, how the entire that sari industry was working. You see, everything was in cash. You know, there would be the powerloom owner who would buy yarn, you know, and turn it into grey fabric, and then that material would then go to somebody else who would then dye it. You know, a third person would then print it. You know, and then this printed fabric would then go to the, say, the sari maker or the dress material maker. So everything was in cash. You know, it is going from one hand to another. But now suddenly, when you bring in GST and all these things, now these people cannot handle this entire thing. So what has happened is your rural economy, you know, this way of your money rotating, that has stopped. You know, and it has also killed the informal sector. Like, if you look at what this informal sector was, basically it was an employment sink, right, for the agricultural laborers, right? If suppose your monsoon failed, that is where they would find, and plus, you know, a lot of these jobs were low skill, low technology, but it was a real shock absorber, right? So today you don't have a shock absorber. So, and there is no liquidity, there is no sentiment today. So it's a very, it's entirely mysterious, you know, like I think this party used to be referred to at one time as Baniya Jain Party, but now it is no longer BJP, it is probably BPP, you know, Badi Punjiwadi Party, you know, and they have killed their own constituency at one level. I mean, it's a different thing that they still vote for it, but I would say that this entire crisis started from there, you know, and if rural economy is accounting for, you ask any FMCG player, he will tell you that suppose the general market was growing by X, rural was growing by 1.5x, you know, and that was where the extra demand was coming. And today you have killed that economy, and you know, through, I mean, actually through a very puritanical kind of a thing, you know. I mean, I think this regime is very puritanical, you know. Cash is bad, non-vegetarian is bad, right? Digital is good, vegetarian is good. So I think and same thing, you know, chemical fertilizer is all bad. It should be, a farmer should only do zero budget natural farming, you know. So it's a very puritanical, very Brahminical party, and I think ultimately the Brahmin has killed the Baniya. Thank you.